Hi, I'm Rudolph. Thanks so much for joining me for this instructional video. I have all kinds of great tips and tricks to show you today. Why don't you join me over in the studio and we'll get started. I think we can agree that we're all here for the same reason, right? To be the best cartoonists we possibly can be. And what if I were to tell you, you give me 10 minutes, I'll give you the tips, tricks, and secrets to how to use the brush and the Crow Quill. What do you say, join me? Now, tools like the brush or the Crow Quill aren't quite as easy to use as things like the pen or the pencil. They take a level of skill, practice, and concentration that pay off in the long run, but you might not see right away. The number one thing when using these new materials is buy quality, buy sable, buy hunts, and practice. Practice, practice, practice. Now let's take a look at the Crow Quill. A pretty simple tool, really. It consists of a plastic handle and interchangeable tips. This one is a 102. A small reservoir in the tip is what holds the ink. To create a thinner or thicker line, more or less pressure is pressed on the tip, spreading the tines and creating your line. A key to using this tool correctly is to know to always pull it away from you. The more or less pressure you push down, the thinner or thicker the line. Now, only certain movements with this pen will work well. Notice if you push forward, the tool does not work correctly. A key to avoiding this problem is to always turn your paper, creating a natural situation for the pen to work. Certain techniques are tailor-made for this pen. This technique, similar to feathering with a brush, is a very natural movement for this pen. Now let's take a look at the different line values we can get out of this pen. We can get a very thin line, and the more pressure you push and the more broken in your pen is, the thicker your lines can become. Basically creating 6 pens in one. Now, if we want to do this with a fixed width pen, each line we use is always the same size. If we want to change the line value, we need to change a pen. Now let's look at a panel done with a Crow Quill. Notice the waterfall. Very relatively thick lines, and then the very fine lines that we have for the texture of the boat, the characters, and the rest of it. The speed lines were all done with a micron fixed width pen. Now look at this panel. All the very fine line you can get out of a single tool, the Crow Quill. And all this very intricate, smooth lines, all done with the Crow Quill as well. The detail work. The Crow Quill is a truly invaluable tool. Now let's take a look at the brush. The brush is made up of 3 major portions: the bristles, the ferrule, and the handle. It's important when dipping in the inkwell not to get ink up into the ferrule. Over time it will dry and ruin the point of the brush. Just like the Crow Quill, the brush should always be pulled away. Notice the large variety of line value you can get out of the brush, even more so than the Crow Quill, but it does take much practice to master this tool. Lines as fine as baby teeth. Now look here. In one stroke, we get several different line values. Now if you wanted to try this with a fixed width pen, it would take several more strokes, or using two separate pens. Notice we create the shape. To create that arc, we need to actually create another line. Fill that in. We get the same effect, but takes twice as long to complete. Now let's take a look at this panel. All done with a brush. Look at all the variation in line width, the weight that you can get from a brush, the different tapering techniques. A truly versatile tool. Now in this next panel, this was also done with a brush, except for the character's eyes. Look at the different amounts of weight we can get out of these lines. The different kind of feathering techniques, and dry brush methods that can very rarely be done with any other tool. Now in this panel, we use a very thick outline to push the character into the foreground. The background is all done with a Crow Quill, adding to the spatial difference between the two characters in a 2D environment. Now let's take a look at the brush in action. Notice how often the page is turned. These tools only work well if they're pulled in one direction. They're very unforgiving, but also very versatile in their scope. Hey, thanks for joining me today. It's really been a pleasure to share all my knowledge with you, and I hope to see you soon back in my studio. Take care.